The heavy oak doors at the back of the Pierre Hotel's grand ballroom flew open. The music faltered. Conversations died mid-sentence. Every head turned as Arthur Penhaligon, head of the secretive Blackwood group, strode purposefully across the marble floor, two assistants with leather portfolios following in his wake. He ignored Evelyn Vance, the millionaire shipping magnate celebrating at the center of the room. Instead, Arthur walked directly to a woman standing in the shadows, Evelyn Vance, Sterling's wife of 22 years. Before the stunned crowd, Arthur bowed deeply, a gesture of absolute fealty. "The board is assembled, madam," he announced, his voice carrying through the sudden silence. "We awaited your signal." Sterling's face flushed with confusion as he stepped forward. "Penhaligon? What is this?" "This is a private event for Vance Holdings." Arthur's expression was one of bored disdain as he turned slightly. "Mr. Vance, you seem to be under a delusion. You are currently standing in a building owned by the Blackwood estate. You are drinking wine paid for by the Blackwood Trust. And you are speaking to the woman who owns 60% of your outstanding debt. Have you ever been underestimated, overlooked, made to feel invisible by someone who should have valued you most? Tonight, you'll witness what happens when a woman who's been silenced for decades finally speaks her truth. But how did Evelyn Blackwood transform from the silent wife in the shadows to the woman who brought a shipping empire to its knees in a single night? Hey, my beautiful sisters, can we talk about the power that lies dormant within us? That strength we sometimes bury beneath other people's expectations? For years, maybe decades, you might have dimmed your light to make someone else shine brighter. Perhaps you've swallowed your wisdom to avoid being called difficult. Or maybe you've hidden your true worth because someone made you believe you weren't enough. Today's story is for every woman who's ever been called past her prime or replaced by a newer model. For every woman who's been told to be grateful for crumbs when she deserved the whole feast. For every woman who's looked in the mirror and wondered where her true self went. My sisters, your value doesn't decrease with age. It compounds. Your worth isn't determined by someone else's inability to see it. And your power? It's always been there, waiting for the moment you decide to reclaim it. So settle in as we witness one woman's journey from shadow to light. Because Evelyn's story isn't just about revenge, it's about resurrection. And it might just inspire your own. The air in the grand ballroom of the Pierre Hotel was thick with the scent of expensive lilies and the suffocating weight of old money. Evelyn Vance stood at the periphery, the shadows of a velvet curtain shielding her from the predatory eyes of Manhattan's elite. She smoothed the fabric of her gown, a deep, obsidian silk that seemed to absorb the light around her. For 22 years, she had been the quiet power behind Evelyn Vance, the man currently standing under the central chandelier. Sterling was a millionaire whose face was synonymous with global shipping, a man who commanded rooms with a bark and a grin. But tonight, Sterling wasn't alone. On his arm was Katarina, a 24-year-old runway model whose dress was less a garment and more a dare. Evelyn watched them. She didn't feel the sharp, jagged glass of jealousy anymore. That had dulled months ago when she found the burner phone in Sterling's briefcase. Tonight, she felt something much more dangerous. Calculated peace. Sterling clinked his crystal glass, the sound cutting through the chatter. "Friends, colleagues," Sterling's voice boomed. "Tonight, we celebrate the 25th anniversary of the Vance Heritage Fund. And as I look at the beautiful Katarina beside me, I'm reminded that progress requires new energy, new blood." A ripple of uneasy laughter moved through the crowd. Everyone knew Evelyn was in the room. They had seen her earlier, the woman they pitied. The washed-up wife who had been replaced by a younger, shinier model. "I'd like to announce," Sterling continued, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on Evelyn with a cruel, dismissive glint, "that as of tomorrow, the Vance Heritage Fund will be under new leadership. It's time to move past the traditional ways of the past." He was stripping her of the only thing she had left, the foundation she had built from the ground up while he was out, expanding the empire. Evelyn took a slow sip of her mineral water. She remembered the day she met Sterling. She was a 20-year-old student at Columbia, the daughter of a reclusive academic. She had hidden her true name to see if someone could love her for her mind, not her vault. Sterling had been charming then. But greed is a slow-acting poison. "Excuse me, Evelyn?" She turned to find Margot St. James, a woman whose family had owned half of Chicago since the 1800s. Margot looked at Evelyn with a mixture of sadness and respect. "Are you really going to let him take the fund?" "You are the fund. He thinks he's taking a chair," Evelyn whispered, her voice like silk over steel. "He doesn't realize he's sitting in a house of cards." The room went cold after Arthur's announcement. Katarina, the model, blinked her long lashes, looking between Sterling and Evelyn. "Sterling? What is he talking about?" Evelyn stepped out of the shadows. The light caught the heirloom diamonds at her throat, stones that had been in the Blackwood family for 4 generations. "You always called me a distraction, Sterling," Evelyn said, her voice steady and clear. "You told me I was lucky to share your name, but the truth is, I never used your money. I used mine to save you. Every time you made a bad bet, every time a shipment went missing, it was the Blackwood group that bailed you out. I was the one who kept the lights on." Sterling's bravado vanished. His skin turned a sickly shade of gray. You're a Blackwood? Why didn't you tell me?" "I wanted a husband, Sterling, not a business partner," Evelyn replied. "But since you've decided to bring new energy to the foundation, I've decided to bring a new direction to my portfolio. As of 10 minutes ago, the Blackwood Group has called in all Vance Holdings loans. Effective immediately. Security, not the hotels but Evelyn's, moved in. They didn't use force. They simply stood like stone sentinels. You have until tomorrow morning to vacate the penthouse, Evelyn said, her tone almost conversational. I believe there's a lovely studio apartment in Queens that fits your current credit score. I've already had your belongings sent there, along with the signed divorce papers. She turned to the model, who was now backed into a corner. Evelyn reached out and gently adjusted the girl's necklace. A word of advice, dear. When you're looking for a king, make sure he isn't wearing a borrowed crown. Evelyn didn't wait for a reply. She turned her back on the wreckage of her marriage and walked toward the exit. The crowd parted before her, faces a mixture of shock, admiration, and the particular delight New York society takes in witnessing a spectacular fall from grace. As the heavy doors closed behind her, Evelyn heard the explosion of voices, the gasps, the inevitable rush of gossip that would sweep through Manhattan by morning. She didn't care. For the first time in decades, she was walking in her own footsteps, not following in someone else's. Ladies, have you ever walked away from something toxic with your head held high? Share your moment of strength in the comments below. 6 months later, the Vance name was a footnote in a bankruptcy filing. Evelyn sat in a sun-drenched loft in SoHo, morning light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. It wasn't a mansion, but it was hers, every inch of it chosen with intention. From the mid-century modern furniture to the abstract expressionist paintings by female artists that adorned the walls. She scrolled through applications on her tablet, reviewing candidates for the next cohort of the Phoenix Initiative, the mentorship program she had launched for women over 40 who had been sidelined by their careers or marriages. Women like her who deserved a second chance to become who they were meant to be. Her phone buzzed with a text notification. Madeline, her daughter, studying art history in London, saw the Harper's Bazaar cover. Mom, you look like you finally breathed for the first time. Love you. Evelyn smiled, setting down her tablet to respond. That's exactly how it feels. Miss you. Call tonight. She glanced at the magazine on her coffee table. There she was on the cover, not as Mrs. Sterling Vance, the socialite wife, but as Evelyn Blackwood, founder of the Phoenix Initiative and the new public face of the Blackwood Group. The headline read, "The woman behind the curtain steps into the light." The interview inside had caused quite a stir in financial circles. Evelyn had spoken candidly about her years as the invisible architect of Sterling's success, about the systematic way he had diminished her contributions while building his empire on her family's money and her business acumen. "I don't consider it revenge," she had told the interviewer. "I consider it reclamation of my name, my power, and my purpose." Evelyn looked at her reflection in the window glass. The woman who looked back at her was neither young like Katarina nor defeated like the woman Sterling had dismissed. She was something far more powerful. A woman who had finally recognized her own worth, who had shed the constraints of others' expectations. The journey to this moment had begun long before the gala, long before the burner phone discovery. Perhaps it had started 23 years ago, when Evelyn Blackwood, heir to one of America's oldest fortunes, decided to attend Columbia under her mother's maiden name. She had grown weary of fortune hunters and sycophants, of being valued for her family's wealth rather than her mind. The Blackwood name opened doors, but it also attracted people with agendas. For once, she wanted to be seen for herself. In her Renaissance literature class, she had met Evelyn Vance, handsome, ambitious, and seemingly genuine in his interest in her thoughts rather than her background. He was working his way through college, building a small import business on the side. His determination had impressed her. His dreams had seemed noble. "You're different from these other trust fund kids," he had told her after class one day, falling into step beside her as they crossed the quad. "You actually have something to say. How do you know I'm not a trust fund kid?" she had asked, curious about his assumption. Sterling had laughed. "The way you count your coffee change. The way you actually listen in class instead of just waiting for your turn to speak. You're hungry for something more than money." He had been right in his way. She was hungry for connection, for purpose, for a life that wasn't defined by the Blackwood legacy. And Sterling, with his rough-around-the-edges charm and ambitious plans, had seemed like the perfect escape from the gilded cage of her upbringing. Their courtship had been swift and passionate. Sterling took her to hole-in-the-wall restaurants in Queens where the food was authentic and the prices reasonable. They spent weekends exploring parts of New York that Evelyn, despite growing up in the city, had never seen, the vibrant neighborhoods beyond the privileged bubble of the Upper East Side. When he proposed 6 months later, on the Brooklyn promenade with the Manhattan skyline glittering behind him, Evelyn had made a fateful decision. She would not tell him about her family's wealth. Not yet. She wanted to build something real, something based on love rather than advantage. She would help him achieve his dreams through her own intelligence and work ethic, not through her family's connections. "Yes," she had said, accepting the modest diamond ring that he had clearly stretched his budget to afford. "But I want to keep my career. I want us to build something together." "Absolutely," Sterling had agreed, his eyes bright with plans. "You and me against the world, Evie. We'll show them all what we can do." The early years had been good. They lived in a small apartment in Brooklyn, far from the Blackwood mansion where Evelyn had grown up. Sterling's import business grew steadily, with Evelyn working alongside him, offering insights that proved invaluable. When she suggested expanding into shipping rather than just imports, the company's profits tripled within 2 years. When she recommended diversifying into technology logistics, they weathered the recession that sank their competitors. "You have an instinct for this?" Sterling had marveled one night, as they celebrated their first $1 million year. "Where did you learn to think like this?" "I observe," Evelyn had said simply. "I listen. I read. The patterns are there if you pay attention." She didn't mention the business education she'd received at her father's knee, the conversations about market trends and investment strategies that had been dinner table talk in the Blackwood household. She told herself the omission wasn't a lie. She was simply allowing Sterling to see her, not her background. As the business grew, so did Sterling's confidence. He began to be featured in business magazines. The shipping savant, they called him. Evelyn stood behind him in the photos, her smile practiced, her contribution unacknowledged. "It's better this way," Sterling assured her when she gently pointed out that her role in the company's success was being erased. "Clients respect a clear chain of command. 2 captains sink the ship, Evie." She had accepted it then, telling herself that their private knowledge of their partnership was what mattered, not public recognition. But looking back now, Evelyn recognized that moment as the first hairline crack in the foundation of their marriage, the first indication that Sterling's ego would eventually consume everything in its path, including her. Their daughter, Madeline, was born 7 years into their marriage. Sterling had been disappointed. He'd wanted a son to carry on the Vance name. But Evelyn had found in motherhood a joy that compensated for her husband's growing distance. "She has your eyes," the nurse had said, placing the newborn in Evelyn's arms. "No," Sterling had corrected, looking down at his daughter with a mixture of love and resignation. "Those are Evelyn's mother's eyes. The Vance men have blue eyes." It was the first time he had mentioned wanting to meet her family, whom she had kept at a distance with vague excuses about strained relationships and geographical separation. The truth, that her parents were prominent figures in New York society who lived 20 blocks from their current apartment, was a secret that grew heavier with each passing year. As Sterling's empire expanded, so did his ego. The man who had once valued Evelyn's mind now dismissed her suggestions as feminine intuition. The partner who had once shared every decision now made pronouncements from on high. "The Singapore terminal is a sure thing," he had insisted, overriding her concerns about the environmental impact studies. "You worry too much, Evie. This is business, not a charity." It was during their 10th anniversary trip to Boston that the first crisis occurred. The Singapore terminal development had indeed failed environmental review, just as Evelyn had predicted. The loss was catastrophic, threatening to unravel everything they had built. Sterling had paced their hotel suite, tie loosened, hair disheveled from running his hands through it repeatedly. "We're finished," he had said, voice hollow. "The bank will call the loans. The investors will pull out. Everything we've built." That night, after Sterling had finally fallen into an exhausted sleep, Evelyn had made a call, her first contact with the Blackwood group in a decade. "This is Evelyn Blackwood," she had said quietly into the phone, the name feeling strange on her tongue after so many years as Evelyn Vance. "I need to speak with Arthur Penhaligon." "Yes, I know what time it is in New York. Tell him it's Eleanor's daughter." By morning, the crisis had been averted. A mysterious investor had stepped in, offering favorable terms that saved the Singapore project. Sterling never questioned their good fortune, too relieved to look the gift horse in the mouth. "See," he had crowed over breakfast, his confidence fully restored. "I told you it would work out. You worry too much, Evie." It became a pattern. As Sterling took bigger risks, made bolder moves, the invisible safety net of Blackwood money caught him when he fell. And fall he did repeatedly. The shipping magnate the world saw was largely a creation of careful financial engineering that Sterling himself never fully understood. Evelyn told herself it was for their daughter's security, for the thousands of employees who depended on Vance Holdings, for the charitable foundation she had built within the company structure, the Vance Heritage Fund, which supported educational initiatives for underprivileged children across the country. But as the years passed, as Sterling's contempt for her grew in direct proportion to his public success, Evelyn began to recognize the hollow core of their marriage. The man she had once loved now existed primarily as a carefully constructed public image. Behind closed doors, he was petty, cruel, and increasingly unfaithful. "You're lucky to have me, you know," he had told her on their 20th anniversary, after too many glasses of champagne. "Most men would have traded up years ago. But I'm loyal." Evelyn had smiled thinly, knowing about the string of assistants and models he'd bedded over the years. She had chosen to look the other way, telling herself it was the price of peace, the cost of maintaining their family's stability for Madeline's sake. But the burner phone had been the final confirmation, though not a surprise. Sterling had grown careless in his arrogance. The texts between him and Katarina were explicit, not just in their sexual content but in their shared disdain for Evelyn. "The old ball and chain is asking questions about the Tokyo trip," Sterling had written. "Tell her you're meeting investors," Katarina had replied. "It's not like she understands what you do anyway. She's just a relic from your past." That night, alone in their penthouse while Sterling was supposedly at a business dinner, Evelyn had made another call to the Blackwood group. It was time to reclaim her birthright. Time to step out of the shadows. "Arthur," she had said when her old family friend answered, "I need to come home." The plan had taken months to execute. Financial structures had to be carefully unwound. Positions had to be liquidated. Evidence of Sterling's financial mismanagement and occasional illegality had to be documented. all while Evelyn maintained the perfect facade of the supportive wife, even as Sterling flaunted his relationship with Katarina at private events, believing Evelyn too cowed to object. "You don't mind if Katarina joins us for the Hendersons' dinner, do you?" he would ask, not really asking. "She has such valuable insights into the Asian markets." "Of course not," Evelyn would reply, her smile never reaching her eyes. "Whatever you think is best for the business." The announcement about the Vance Heritage Fund had been the final straw, the one thing Evelyn had built that was truly meaningful, that actually helped people rather than just generating wealth. Sterling's plan to restructure, it would have gutted its most effective programs in favor of flashy galas and self-congratulatory awards. "Katarina has some wonderful ideas for the fund," he had told Evelyn over breakfast, not bothering to look up from his phone. "More social media presence, celebrity ambassadors. The old model of quiet giving is outdated. Those programs help real people, Sterling," Evelyn had said, her voice tight. "Children who wouldn't have educational opportunities otherwise." Sterling had finally looked up, his expression dismissive. "It's not about the actual giving, Evie. It's about the optics, the networking opportunities. You've never understood that part of the business." In that moment, something had crystallized in Evelyn's heart. The last thread of loyalty, of obligation, had snapped. The plan she had been methodically assembling with Arthur Penhaligon shifted from a contingency to an imperative. The night of the gala, as she had stood in the shadows watching Sterling and Katarina hold court, Evelyn had felt a strange sense of calm. Not the desperate resignation that had been her companion for years, but a clear-eyed certainty. She was no longer fighting to save her marriage or even to punish Sterling. She was simply claiming what was hers, her power, her identity, her future. Now, 6 months after the gala that had changed everything, Evelyn sat in her SoHo loft reviewing applications for the next cohort of the Phoenix Initiative. Women like her, intelligent, capable, who had sublimated their own identities to support husbands or families. Women who deserved a second chance to become who they were meant to be. The buzzer for the loft's entrance interrupted her thoughts. She checked the security monitor to see Arthur Penhaligon waiting below, punctual as always for their weekly meeting. As she buzzed him up, Evelyn caught her reflection again in the window. The woman who looked back at her was not the same one who had stood in the shadows at the pier 6 months ago. This woman's eyes were clear, her posture straight, her purpose defined. She had spent 22 years as Sterling Vance's wife, hiding her power, suppressing her identity. She had another 30 or 40 years ahead of her as Evelyn Blackwood, and she intended to use every one of them. The elevator doors opened, and Arthur stepped into the loft, carrying his usual leather portfolio. "Good morning, Ms. Blackwood," he said with a small bow. Not the deep one from the gala, but a gesture of respect between equals. "The quarterly reports are ready for your review." "Thank you, Arthur," Evelyn replied, gesturing toward the sunlit dining table where they usually worked. "And the special project we discussed?" A rare smile crossed Arthur's austere features. "The Women's Business Incubator? The renovations are complete. We can begin accepting applications next month." Evelyn nodded, satisfaction warming her chest. The incubator would provide office space, mentorship, and seed funding for women entrepreneurs over 40. A demographic largely ignored by traditional venture capital. "Excellent. And has there been any response to our offer for the Vance Heritage Building?" "None yet," Arthur replied. "Mr. Vance's lawyers continue to insist the building isn't for sale, despite the lien." "They'll come around," Evelyn said calmly. "The property taxes alone are more than Sterling can manage now." As they settled into their meeting, reviewing investments and planning new initiatives, Evelyn felt a profound sense of rightness. This was who she had always been meant to be, not a shadow behind a man, but a force in her own right. Not defined by her marriage or even her family name, but by her own vision and values. The Blackwood Group, now under her direct leadership for the first time in decades, had shifted its investment focus toward women-owned businesses and sustainable development. The Vance Heritage Fund, renamed the Blackwood Education Trust, had expanded its programs to include scholarships specifically for women returning to education after raising families. The board is impressed with the returns on the sustainable energy portfolio, Arthur noted, sliding a report across the table. Particularly the solar initiative in Nevada. That was Madeline's suggestion, actually, Evelyn said with a touch of maternal pride. She has an instinct for identifying ventures with both social and financial value. Arthur raised an eyebrow. She's her mother's daughter. Yes, Evelyn agreed. Though I hope she won't take as long as I did to embrace that fact. Sterling, last she heard, was indeed living in that studio apartment in Queens. His attempts to rally investors had failed once the extent of his financial mismanagement became public. Katarina had left him within weeks, once the private jet and black credit card disappeared. He's been trying to schedule meetings with some of our former Asian partners, Arthur informed her, his tone neutral. Without success, of course. Your message to the industry was quite effective. Evelyn felt no satisfaction at Sterling's downfall. No vindictive pleasure. Only a quiet certainty that justice had been served, not by her hand, but by the natural consequences of his own actions. And Katarina? She asked, more out of curiosity than concern. Back in Milan, Arthur replied, modeling for a mid-tier fashion house. Her brief association with Mr. Vance seems to have limited her opportunities with the more prestigious brands. Evelyn made a mental note to have someone reach out to the young woman. Not out of pity, but from a recognition that Katarina, too, had been playing a role in a system that valued women primarily for their youth and beauty. Perhaps she could benefit from the Phoenix Initiative's mentorship. Let's move on to the Education Trust, Evelyn suggested, turning the page in her portfolio. I want to discuss expanding the scholarship program to include women over 50 returning to school. If you know a woman who's found her voice after years of being silenced, tag her in the comments. Let's celebrate each other's courage. Madeline, now 20, had been angry at first. Not at her mother's actions, but at being kept in the dark about her heritage. The confrontation had come during a tense lunch at a quiet restaurant in Greenwich Village, shortly after the gala that had exposed everything. Why didn't you tell me who we really were? She had demanded, her voice low but intense. All these years, living like we were dependent on Dad's success, when actually it was your family's money propping him up. Do you have any idea how that makes me feel? Evelyn had taken a deep breath, recognizing the hurt beneath her daughter's anger. Because I wanted you to become your own person, she had answered honestly. Not a Blackwood, not a Vance. Just Madeline. That wasn't your choice to make, Madeline had countered, pushing her salad around her plate. You decided who I got to be by hiding half of my identity. You're right, Evelyn had acknowledged, the admission costing her. I thought I was protecting you from the burden of the Blackwood name, the expectations that come with it. But I was wrong to keep it from you. I'm sorry, Madeline. Her daughter had studied her face, searching for something. Is that why you stayed with him so long? To give me normalcy? Partly, Evelyn admitted, and partly because I needed to be sure I could stand on my own when I finally left. Stand on your own? Madeline had repeated incredulously. Mom, you're a Blackwood. You never needed to worry about standing on your own. The money, no, Evelyn had agreed. But my sense of self? My confidence in my own judgment? Those things Sterling had systematically undermined for years. I needed to rebuild them before I could walk away. Madeline had fallen silent, considering this. He was awful to you, wasn't he? Worse than I knew. Your father is a complicated man, Evelyn had said carefully. He has good qualities. But yes, over time, our marriage became corrosive. And now, Madeline had asked, what happens now? Now we both get to decide who we want to be, Evelyn had told her. Without pretense. Without hiding. Their relationship had strengthened in the months since that conversation. Madeline had transferred from her business program at London School of Economics to art history, her true passion. Dad always said art was for people who couldn't do real work, she had explained during one of their weekly video calls. I believed him for too long. And now, Evelyn had asked. Madeline's smile had been radiant. Now I'm studying what I love. And I'm good at it, Mom. Really good. The Phoenix Initiative participants often asked Evelyn if she regretted the years with Sterling, if she wished she had claimed her power sooner. Evelyn's answer was always the same: every experience shapes us. Even the painful ones, especially the painful ones, can forge us into something stronger. She had emerged from the crucible of her marriage not bitter, but focused. Not vengeful, but purposeful. The woman who had stood in the shadows at the Pierre Hotel had been a chrysalis, containing within her the woman she would become once freed from constraints. The first cohort graduation ceremony is tonight, Evelyn reminded Arthur as they concluded their meeting. Will you be attending? I wouldn't miss it, he replied, gathering his papers. Your mother would have been proud of what you've built, Evelyn. The mention of her mother, Eleanor Blackwood, a formidable philanthropist who had championed women's education long before it was fashionable, brought a bittersweet smile to Evelyn's face. Eleanor had passed away during Evelyn's 15th year of marriage to Sterling, never knowing that her daughter had married under false pretenses, never seeing the grandchild who carried her eyes. She would have been even prouder of Madeline, Evelyn said softly. She has Eleanor's spirit, that same unwillingness to accept limitations. After Arthur left, Evelyn spent the afternoon preparing for the graduation ceremony. The Phoenix Initiative's first cohort of 15 women had completed the 6-month program, which combined business education, personal development, and practical support for women reinventing themselves after significant life transitions. There was Diane, a former corporate lawyer who had left her career to raise 3 children and was now launching a mediation practice focused on helping women navigate divorce. And Rebecca, who had spent 30 years as a military wife, moving wherever her husband was stationed, and was now starting a relocation consultancy for military families. And Sophia, whose husband's death had left her with a small construction company she knew nothing about running, until now. Each woman had a story of adaptation, of resilience, of finding strength in the face of change. Each had arrived at the Phoenix Initiative feeling somewhat lost, somewhat diminished by circumstances. Each was graduating with a clear vision, a solid plan, and a network of support that would continue long after the formal program ended. As Evelyn fastened the Blackwood diamonds around her throat, no longer a secret symbol, but a public statement, she thought about the journey ahead. There would be challenges, certainly. The financial world was still largely a men's club. There would be those who resented her power, who would try to undermine her vision. But for the first time in decades, Evelyn Blackwood was standing in her own light, not someone else's shadow. And that made all the difference. Her phone buzzed with a text from Madeline. Knock 'em dead tonight, Mom. Wish I could be there. So proud of what you're building. Evelyn smiled, typing back, building it for both of us. For all of us. The graduation ceremony was held in the airy, light-filled space that would soon become the women's business incubator. The 15 graduates, their families, and a select group of mentors and supporters gathered to celebrate not just the completion of a program, but the beginning of 15 new journeys. Evelyn stood at the podium, looking out at the faces before her. Women of different ages, backgrounds, and circumstances, united by their courage to reinvent themselves. When I founded the Phoenix Initiative, she began, I had a simple vision. To create the support system I wished I'd had during my own transformation. A place where women could find not just practical resources, but also understanding. Where they could be seen not for who they had been, but for who they were becoming. She paused, making eye contact with each of the graduates. The world often tells women of a certain age that our time has passed, that we should gracefully fade into the background, that our value diminishes as our years advance. Tonight, 15 women stand before you as living proof of how wrong that narrative is. Applause rippled through the room. Several of the graduates wiped away tears. Each of you came to this program with wisdom earned through experience, with resilience forged through challenges, with clarity that only comes from having navigated life's complexities. You didn't need me or the Phoenix Initiative to give you those qualities. They were already within you. What you needed was permission to recognize your own worth, to reclaim your own power, to step into your own light. Evelyn's voice grew stronger, more passionate. Tonight, as you graduate from this program, I want you to know that your journey is just beginning, that your greatest contributions lie ahead, that the world needs exactly what you have to offer, not despite your age and experience, but because of it. As she called each woman forward to receive her certificate and share a brief word about her new venture, Evelyn felt a sense of completion. This moment, these women, this purpose, was what she had been moving toward all along, even when she couldn't see the path clearly. After the ceremony, as the graduates and their families mingled over champagne and hors d'oeuvres, Evelyn found herself approached by a familiar face. Margot St. James, the Chicago heiress who had spoken to her at the gala 6 months earlier. "You did it," Margot said, raising her glass in a small toast. "You reclaimed your power, and now you're helping others do the same." "It's been a journey," Evelyn acknowledged. "One I couldn't have predicted when we spoke that night." "Oh, I think you knew exactly what you were doing," Margot countered with a knowing smile. "You just needed the right moment to strike." Evelyn laughed softly. "Perhaps, though I didn't anticipate how liberating it would feel to finally be myself, without apology or disguise." "Freedom suits you," Margot observed. "Much better than that shadow you were living in." She glanced around the room at the graduates. "And clearly, you're not the only one who needed to step into the light." "We all have our shadows," Evelyn said thoughtfully. "The stories we tell ourselves about who we are, what we deserve, what's possible for us. Sometimes it takes seeing someone else break free to realize we can do the same." Margot studied her with newfound respect. "You know, the old New York families are talking about you. Some are scandalized, of course, they always are when a woman refuses to play by their rules. But others are watching with interest. You've become something of an inspiration, Evelyn." "That wasn't my intention," Evelyn said honestly. "The best inspirations rarely are," Margot replied. "They're just people living their truth so boldly that it gives others permission to do the same." As the evening wound down and the last of the guests departed, Evelyn found herself alone in the space that would soon house a new generation of women entrepreneurs. She walked slowly through the rooms, imagining them filled with energy, ideas, and the particular determination that comes from having been underestimated. Her phone buzzed with a notification, an email from her lawyer. The subject line read, "Vance Heritage Building, offer accepted." Evelyn smiled. Sterling had finally conceded. The building that housed the foundation she had built would now officially belong to the Blackwood Education Trust. The circle was complete. How many of you have had to have difficult conversations with your children about your past choices? Drop a heart emoji if you've been there. 1 year to the day after the gala that had changed everything, Evelyn stood in the lobby of what was now the Blackwood Education Center. The building had been transformed. The ostentatious gold fixtures and self-aggrandizing portraits of Sterling that had once dominated the space were gone, replaced by clean lines, natural light, and artwork by female artists from underrepresented communities. Today marked the official opening of the center's expanded programs, including a technology training initiative for women re-entering the workforce, a financial literacy program for single mothers, and a leadership academy for girls from low-income neighborhoods. Ms. Blackwood, a young woman approached, tablet in hand. "The press is ready whenever you are." "Thank you, Zoe," Evelyn replied. "I'll be there in a moment." As the assistant moved away, Evelyn took a deep breath, centering herself. Public speaking had never been her favorite activity. During her years with Sterling, she had deliberately stayed in the background, letting him take the spotlight. But now, as the face of both the Blackwood Group and the Education Trust, she had embraced this new role with the same determination she brought to everything. The small auditorium was filled with journalists, community partners, and the first group of program participants. As Evelyn took the stage, she caught sight of a familiar figure slipping into the back row, Madeline, who had flown in from London as a surprise. Evelyn's heart swelled with love and pride. Her daughter had blossomed in the past year, finding her own path in art history and museum curation. They had grown closer through their weekly video calls and occasional visits, building a relationship based on honesty and mutual respect rather than the careful half-truths that had characterized their earlier years. "Good morning," Evelyn began, her voice steady and clear. Thank you all for being here to celebrate the opening of the Blackwood Education Center. This building has a special significance for me. For many years, it housed a foundation that did important work, but was limited in its vision and reach. Today, we're expanding that vision to create opportunities for women and girls at every stage of life. She outlined the new programs, introduced key staff members, and shared stories of some of the women who had already benefited from the Phoenix Initiative. Throughout her presentation, Evelyn maintained the quiet confidence that had become her hallmark. Not the brash, attention-seeking style that Sterling had cultivated, but a grounded authority that invited trust. We often talk about giving back as if it's an obligation, she concluded, but I prefer to think of it as giving forward, investing in the potential of women who have been told, in ways both subtle and overt, that their dreams must be deferred, their ambitions tempered, their voices quieted. Today we say something different. Your dreams matter. Your ambitions are valid. Your voices are essential. And we are here to help you amplify them. The applause was warm and genuine. As Evelyn stepped away from the podium to mingle with the attendees, she felt a tap on her shoulder. Turning, she found herself face to face with Madeline. Surprise, her daughter said, pulling her into a hug. I couldn't miss your big day. I'm so glad you're here, Evelyn said, holding her daughter close. When did you arrive? Last night. I stayed at the loft. Hope you don't mind that I still have a key. Of course not. It's your home too, whenever you want it to be. They moved through the crowd together, Madeline proudly introducing herself as Evelyn's daughter, rather than hiding behind her father's more recognizable name, as she once might have done. Ms. Blackwood. A reporter approached, recorder in hand. Jessica Chen from the Wall Street Journal. Could I ask you a few questions about the Blackwood Group's recent acquisition of Sterling Vance's former shipping terminals in Singapore? Evelyn smiled politely. Today is about the education center, Ms. Chen. But yes, the Blackwood Group has acquired those terminals and is implementing the environmental safeguards that should have been in place from the beginning. We believe responsible business practices and profitability can coexist. And what about the rumors that Sterling Vance is attempting to rebuild his company with new investors? The reporter pressed. I wish Mr. Vance success in all his legitimate business endeavors, Evelyn replied smoothly. Now, if you'll excuse me, I should greet our program participants. As they moved away, Madeline squeezed her mother's arm. That was diplomatic. Is it true? Is he trying to make a comeback? Apparently, Evelyn confirmed. Arthur says he's been meeting with some minor players in Dubai. Nothing that concerns us. And you're really okay with that? After everything he did? Evelyn considered the question carefully. I don't wish him ill, Madeline. What happened between your father and me was complex. We both made choices that led us to where we are now. I found my path. I hope he finds his. Madeline studied her mother's face. You've changed so much in a year. You're lighter somehow. Unburdened. Evelyn agreed. There's a freedom in living authentically that I never understood until now. Later that evening, after the successful launch event, Evelyn and Madeline sat in the SoHo loft sharing a bottle of wine and catching up on the past few months. I've been thinking about changing my name, Madeline said suddenly. Not to Blackwood necessarily. Maybe something new altogether. Evelyn set down her glass, giving her daughter her full attention. What's prompting this? I'm not ashamed of being a Vance, Madeline clarified. But I'm not just Dad's daughter. And I'm not just your daughter either. I want something that feels like me. I understand that completely, Evelyn said. Whatever you decide, I'll support you. That's the thing, Madeline continued, twirling her wine glass thoughtfully. You've always supported me, even when you were struggling yourself. I didn't see it then, how much you were protecting me from, how carefully you navigated between Dad's ego and my well-being. But I see it now. Evelyn felt a lump form in her throat. I tried my best. I didn't always get it right. You got the important things right, Madeline assured her. You taught me resilience, integrity, how to stand up after being knocked down. I just didn't realize I was learning those lessons until recently. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the city lights twinkling beyond the windows. I saw Dad last month, Madeline said finally. In London. He asked to meet for coffee. Evelyn kept her expression neutral, though her heart rate quickened slightly. How was that? Strange, Madeline admitted. He's diminished somehow. Not just financially, but in his presence. He spent most of the time talking about his new ventures, trying to convince me, or maybe himself, that he's on the verge of another big success. And Katarina? Evelyn couldn't help asking. Ancient history, apparently. He's dating a British socialite now, Lady something or other. She wasn't there, but he made sure to drop her name about a dozen times. Madeline shook her head. He asked about you. What did he want to know? If you were seeing anyone. If you ever talked about him. If you seemed happy. Madeline met her mother's eyes. I told him you were too busy changing the world to discuss him, and that you seemed happier than I'd ever seen you. Evelyn laughed softly. Accurate on all counts. He said something else, right before he left. Madeline continued, her expression turning serious. He said, your mother was always extraordinary. I just couldn't see it until it was too late. Evelyn absorbed this, feeling a complex mix of emotions. Vindication, sadness for what might have been, and a final release of any lingering attachment to the man she had once loved. Perhaps that's growth on his part, she said finally. I hope so, for his sake. Do you ever think about what might have happened if you told him the truth from the beginning? Madeline asked. About being a Blackwood? Evelyn considered this. I've asked myself that many times. Would he have loved me for myself, or for my family's wealth and connections? Would I have developed my own strength if I'd had the Blackwood name to fall back on? Would you have had a different childhood? She shook her head. But those questions have no answers. We can only move forward from where we are. Well, I like where we are now, Madeline said decisively. And I like who we're becoming. So do I, Evelyn agreed, raising her glass in a toast. To becoming. The next morning, Evelyn woke early, slipping out for a run in the quiet streets of SoHo before the city fully awakened. Physical fitness had become another form of reclamation for her. Sterling had always subtly discouraged her exercise routine, preferring her to focus on maintaining the perfect appearance of a corporate wife rather than building her own strength. Now, at 53, Evelyn was in the best shape of her life. Running cleared her mind, strengthened her body, and reminded her daily that she was capable of more than she had once believed. As she rounded the corner back to her building, she nearly collided with a familiar figure, Arthur Penhaligon, arriving earlier than expected for their scheduled meeting. Arthur, she said, slightly breathless from her run. You're early. And you're predictable, he replied with the hint of a smile. Same 5-mile route every morning. Creatures of habit, both of us, Evelyn acknowledged. Give me 15 minutes to shower and change? Of course. I brought coffee. He held up a carrier with 2 cups from her favorite local cafe. Upstairs, freshly showered and dressed in a simple but elegant pantsuit, Evelyn joined Arthur at the dining table. What couldn't wait until our regular meeting time? She asked, accepting the coffee gratefully. Arthur's expression was serious. We've received an interesting proposal. From Sterling. Evelyn's eyebrows rose in surprise. What kind of proposal? He wants to sell us his remaining patents for the logistics tracking software, the one area where he still holds valuable intellectual property. His asking price is reasonable, actually. Why would he sell to us, of all people? Evelyn asked, skepticism evident in her tone. He claims the technology would integrate well with our sustainable shipping initiatives, Arthur replied. But reading between the lines of his letter, I believe he's acknowledging defeat. This would be his final severance from the industry he once dominated. Evelyn considered this, turning the coffee cup slowly in her hands. What do you think? Is the technology worth acquiring? Objectively, yes. It would save us considerable development time for the African Corridor project. Arthur studied her face. But this isn't just a business decision, is it? No, Evelyn admitted. It's the final chapter of a very long story. She thought about Sterling, the ambitious young man she had fallen in love with, the ruthless businessman he had become, the diminished figure Madeline had described meeting in London. She thought about her own journey from the shadows to the light, from Mrs. Vance to Evelyn Blackwood. Make him a fair offer, she decided. Not generous but fair. And Arthur? Include a non-compete clause. It's time for Sterling to find a new path, away from the industry we both inhabit. Arthur nodded, making a note in his ever-present portfolio. Consider it done. As he gathered his things to leave, he paused. The board is extremely pleased with the Education Center launch. By the way, the press coverage has been overwhelmingly positive. Thank you for telling me, Evelyn said, though I didn't do it for the press. No, Arthur agreed. You did it because it's who you are, who you've always been, beneath the surface. After he left, Evelyn stood by the windows, looking out at the city stretching before her. New York had always been her home, but she was seeing it through new eyes now. Not as Sterling Vance's wife, moving through prescribed social circles, but as Evelyn Blackwood, charting her own course. The Phoenix Initiative was expanding to Chicago and Los Angeles. The Blackwood Education Trust was funding research on barriers to women's advancement in male-dominated fields. The Women's Business Incubator was already nurturing 15 startups led by women over 40. And Madeline was thriving, finding her own identity beyond both her parents' shadows. Evelyn's phone chimed with a calendar reminder. Phoenix Initiative, second cohort interviews, 10 a.m. She gathered her materials, slipped on her jacket, and headed for the door. There were women waiting to begin their own journeys of transformation. Women who, like her, had spent too long dimming their light for others' comfort. Women who were ready to step into their power. The Phoenix Initiative's second cohort interviews brought 25 women to the Blackwood Education Center that morning. Evelyn had insisted on meeting each candidate personally, believing that numbers and resumes could never tell the full story of a woman's potential. Ms. Blackwood. Zoe appeared in the doorway between interviews. There's someone here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she's quite insistent. Evelyn glanced at her schedule. Who is it? Zoe hesitated. Katarina Novak. The name hung in the air between them. Katarina, the model Sterling had paraded at the gala a year ago. The woman who had called Evelyn a relic. Send her in, Evelyn said after a moment's consideration. And reschedule my next interview for 15 minutes later, please. Katarina entered the office with considerably less confidence than she had displayed at the Pierre Hotel. The designer clothes and perfect makeup remained, but something had changed in her posture, in the way her eyes darted around the room before finally meeting Evelyn's. Mrs. Vance, I mean Miss Blackwood, she began, her accent slightly more pronounced than Evelyn remembered. Thank you for seeing me. Please, sit down. Evelyn gestured to the chair across from her desk. This is unexpected. Katarina perched on the edge of the seat, clutching a sleek portfolio. I know. I wouldn't have come, but... She took a deep breath. I need your help. Of all the things Evelyn might have anticipated, this wasn't one of them. My help? With what, exactly? I'm trying to start a business, Katarina said, opening her portfolio. A modeling agency for women over 35. Women the industry considers expired. She pushed several professional mock-ups across the desk. There's a huge market being ignored. Brands targeting older women with younger models who don't represent their reality. Experienced models being pushed out just as they develop real presence. Evelyn studied the materials, genuinely impressed by the thoroughness of the business plan. This is well thought out. I've been working on it for months, Katarina admitted. Since Milan didn't work out. And you've come to me because? Katarina met her eyes directly for the first time. Because no one will take me seriously. They see a model, a pretty face, Sterling Vance's ex-girlfriend. Not a businesswoman. She swallowed hard. And because I owe you an apology. The things I said about you, the way I behaved, it was inexcusable. Evelyn leaned back in her chair, studying the younger woman. Why the change of heart? Reality, Katarina said simply. When Sterling lost everything, I saw how quickly the world dismissed me too. How conditional all that attention and respect had been. And then I read about what you're doing here, giving women second chances, helping them rebuild. I thought maybe you thought I might be willing to do the same for you, Evelyn finished for her. Despite our history. I know it's a lot to ask. Evelyn was silent for a long moment, considering. The easy response would be rejection, to send Katarina away, to view her request as audacious given their past. But something in the younger woman's demeanor spoke to Evelyn. A familiar determination beneath the vulnerability. A woman trying to redefine herself beyond someone else's narrative. The Phoenix Initiative isn't a venture capital fund, Evelyn said finally. We provide mentorship, education, networking, not direct funding. Katarina's face fell slightly. I understand. It was worth trying. However, Evelyn continued, your concept aligns with our mission of creating opportunities for women facing age-related barriers. If you're serious about this venture, I'd be willing to consider you for our next cohort. Katarina's eyes widened. Really? Even after everything? The Phoenix is about transformation, Katarina. About rising from the ashes of one life to build another. Evelyn allowed herself a small smile. I'd be a hypocrite to deny you that opportunity based on our past. I don't know what to say, Katarina murmured. Thank you doesn't seem adequate. Don't thank me yet, Evelyn cautioned. Our program is rigorous. You'll be expected to work harder than you ever have, to be vulnerable in ways that may be uncomfortable, and to support the other women in your cohort as they support you. I can do that, Katarina said with unexpected firmness. I'm not the same person I was a year ago. None of us are, Evelyn observed. That's rather the point. After Katarina left, application materials in hand, Evelyn sat quietly, processing the unexpected encounter. There was a certain symmetry to it. The young woman who had once looked at her with disdain now seeking her guidance, her support. Not revenge, but reclamation. Not just for herself, but potentially for Katarina too. The remainder of the day passed in a blur of interviews, meetings, and conference calls. It was nearly 7 when Evelyn finally headed home. The spring evening still light enough to walk the 15 blocks to her SoHo loft. Her phone rang as she was crossing Houston Street. The screen displayed a name she hadn't seen in years. Eleanor Blackwood Pierce, her cousin, her mother's niece, and the current matriarch of the Boston branch of the Blackwood family. Eleanor, Evelyn answered, curiosity overriding her fatigue. This is unexpected. Evelyn. Her cousin's voice was crisp, New England aristocracy in every syllable. I've been meaning to call for some time. The family has been following your recent activities with interest. I imagine they have, Evelyn replied dryly. The Blackwood family had not been pleased when she had chosen to attend Columbia under her mother's maiden name, even less pleased when she had married Sterling Vance without a prenuptial agreement, and had essentially written her off when she had disappeared into the role of corporate wife. Their silence during her very public reclamation of the Blackwood name had been conspicuous. We're hosting the annual Family Foundation meeting next month at the Cape House, Eleanor continued. The board would like you to attend. Your perspective on educational initiatives for women would be valuable. Evelyn stopped walking, processing what she was hearing. The Blackwood Family Foundation controlled nearly $1 billion in charitable assets. An invitation to present to their board was significant, both as professional recognition and as a tentative olive branch from the family that had distanced themselves from her choices. I appreciate the invitation, Evelyn said carefully. I'll need to check my schedule. Of course, Eleanor replied. And Evelyn, your daughter would be welcome as well. It's time she met her extended family. After they disconnected, Evelyn continued her walk home, mind racing with the implications. The Blackwood family was notoriously private, fiercely protective of their legacy and reputation. Their reaching out now, after her very public divorce and professional reinvention, suggested a reassessment of her value to the family name. The question was whether she wanted to reestablish those ties, whether the Blackwood family connection would enhance or complicate the independent identity she had worked so hard to build. Her phone buzzed with a text from Madeline. "Aunt Eleanor just called me. Did you know about this family meeting thing? Should we go?" Evelyn smiled at her daughter's directness. "Just found out myself," she typed back. "Let's discuss when you're back in New York next week. Your choice matters here." The following morning brought another unexpected development. Arthur arrived for their regular meeting with an unusual tension in his normally impassive features. "Sterling has withdrawn his offer to sell the patents," he announced without preamble. "And he's filed a lawsuit against the Blackwood Group, claiming intellectual property theft." Evelyn set down her coffee cup. "On what grounds?" "He alleges that the environmental compliance software we're implementing in the Singapore terminals is based on proprietary code he developed." Arthur's expression was grim. "It's baseless, of course. Our technology was developed independently. But it will be messy, public, and potentially damaging to our reputation during the litigation process." "Which is exactly what he wants," Evelyn concluded. "This isn't about the software. It's about revenge." "Precisely." Arthur opened his portfolio. "Our legal team recommends an aggressive counter-strategy. A defamation suit, possibly criminal charges for filing false claims." Evelyn considered this, weighing the options carefully. The easy path would be to hit back harder, to use the Blackwood Group's considerable resources to crush Sterling's desperate attempt at retaliation. But something about that approach felt like stepping backward, like being pulled back into the toxic dynamic that had characterized their marriage. "No," she said finally. "We're not going to countersue." Arthur looked up in surprise. "Evelyn, this attack is designed to damage everything you've built. The publicity alone could affect the Education Trust's fundraising, the Phoenix Initiative's reputation." "I understand the risks," she assured him, "but I won't be baited into a public battle that ultimately serves no one. Prepare a simple, factual statement about the baseless nature of the claims. Have our legal team gather the evidence of independent development. And then we proceed with our work as planned." "Sterling will see this as weakness," Arthur warned. "Sterling sees what he expects to see," Evelyn replied. "That's always been his limitation. But I know my strength now, Arthur. It doesn't require his destruction to be validated." The lawsuit made headlines in the financial press the next day, just as Arthur had predicted. "Vance sues Blackwood. Tech theft or revenge?" blared the Wall Street Journal. The business channels ran segments speculating on the bitter divorce battle, extending into corporate warfare. Evelyn maintained her schedule, refusing to be distracted by the media circus. She led a workshop for the Phoenix Initiative participants, met with potential donors for the Education Trust, and finalized plans for the Women's Business Incubator launch. It was during a site visit to the incubator space that she received a call from an unfamiliar number. "Ms. Blackwood? This is Rebecca Chen from the New York Times. I'm working on a profile of female leaders in finance and technology. In light of recent events, I was hoping to get your perspective on—" "Ms. Chen," Evelyn interrupted gently, "I appreciate your interest, but I don't comment on pending litigation. Actually," the reporter continued, "I'm more interested in your transformation from behind-the-scenes supporter to public leader. Many women struggle to claim their rightful recognition after years in supporting roles. Your story resonates beyond the current controversy." Evelyn paused, considering. She had deliberately avoided the media spotlight during the divorce and its aftermath, preferring to let her work speak for itself. But perhaps there was value in sharing her journey, not as a response to Sterling's attacks, but as encouragement for other women facing similar transitions. "I might be open to that conversation," she said finally, "but focused on the Phoenix Initiative and the women we serve, not on my personal history." "Understood," Rebecca agreed. "Would you be willing to meet next week? Perhaps at the Education Center, so I can see the work firsthand." As Evelyn ended the call, she felt a subtle shift in her perspective. Sterling's lawsuit, intended to drag her back into conflict with him, had inadvertently created an opportunity to amplify the work she cared about most. The narrative was hers to shape now, not his to define. That evening, as she prepared for a rare night out, Dinner with Madeline, who had returned early from London. Evelyn found herself reflecting on the year's journey. From the shadows of the Pierre Hotel to the light-filled loft she now called home. From Mrs. Sterling Vance to Evelyn Blackwood. From silent supporter to visible leader. The path hadn't been straight or simple. There had been moments of doubt, of grief for what might have been, of uncertainty about what lay ahead. But standing here now, Evelyn felt a bone-deep certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Not defined by her marriage or its dissolution, but by the purpose she had discovered in helping other women reclaim their power. Her phone chimed with a text from Madeline. Downstairs. Ready when you are. Evelyn took one last look in the mirror. The woman who gazed back was neither young like Katarina nor defeated like the woman Sterling had dismissed. She was something far more powerful. A woman who had finally recognized her own worth, who had shed the constraints of others' expectations, who had emerged from the crucible of her marriage not bitter, but focused. Not vengeful, but purposeful. Evelyn took the elevator down to meet her daughter. When the doors opened to the lobby, she found Madeline waiting, looking sophisticated in a black jumpsuit and statement earrings that Evelyn recognized as pieces from her own jewelry collection. Borrowed without asking, in the comfortable way of mothers and daughters who share more than DNA. You look beautiful, Evelyn said, embracing her. I raided your jewelry box, Madeline admitted with a grin. Hope you don't mind. They suit you better anyway, Evelyn replied, linking arms with her daughter as they stepped out into the evening air. I've made reservations at that new place on Lafayette you mentioned wanting to try. As they walked the few blocks to the restaurant, Madeline filled her in on the latest developments in her academic program and her budding relationship with a fellow art history student. Evelyn listened, savoring these glimpses into her daughter's independent life, so different from the carefully controlled existence Sterling had envisioned for her. The restaurant was buzzing with energy. A sleek, modern space with an open kitchen and walls adorned with works by local artists. As they settled into their corner table, Madeline's expression grew more serious. So, Dad's lawsuit, she said, cutting straight to the point in a way that reminded Evelyn of herself. Is it as ridiculous as it sounds in the press? More so, Evelyn confirmed, unfolding her napkin. It's a desperate attempt to regain some control, to force me back into his orbit. And you're not going to let him, Madeline stated, not a question but a confirmation. No, Evelyn agreed. I've spent enough years responding to Sterling's provocations. This time, I'm choosing a different path. Madeline nodded, satisfied. Good. He called me yesterday, you know. Tried to justify the lawsuit. Said you'd forced his hand by stealing his life's work. She rolled her eyes. I told him I wasn't interested in being his character witness or his therapist. Evelyn felt a surge of pride in her daughter's clear boundaries. That couldn't have been easy. Easier than you might think, Madeline replied. I'm not angry with him anymore. Not really. I just see him clearly now. The good and the bad. She took a sip of her water. Speaking of family drama, what are we doing about Aunt Eleanor's invitation? That's entirely up to you, Evelyn said. The Blackwood family is complicated. They have their own expectations, their own way of doing things. I left that world deliberately when I was about your age. And now they want you back because you're successful and high profile, Madeline observed shrewdly. Likely, Evelyn acknowledged, though Eleanor seemed genuinely interested in the Education Trust's work. The Family Foundation has significant resources that could expand our programs nationally. But at what cost? Madeline asked. Would they try to control the direction? Put the Blackwood stamp on everything? That's the million-dollar question, Evelyn agreed. Or the billion-dollar question in this case. They paused as the server arrived with their appetizers. A burrata salad for Evelyn, tuna tartare for Madeline. I think we should go, Madeline said after the server departed. Together, see what they're really offering, what they really want. We can always walk away if it doesn't feel right. Evelyn studied her daughter's face, seeing the curiosity there, the desire to understand this part of her heritage that had been kept from her for so long. All right, she agreed. We'll go. but with open eyes and firm boundaries. "The Blackwood way," Madeline said with a small smile. "At least, the Evelyn Blackwood way." The rest of dinner passed pleasantly, their conversation turning to lighter topics. Madeline's plans for the summer, Evelyn's upcoming speaking engagement at a women's leadership conference, a potential mother-daughter trip to Paris in the fall. As they walked back to the loft afterward, arm in arm in the warm spring evening, Evelyn felt a deep contentment. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Sterling's lawsuit, the Blackwood family reunion, the continuing growth of her various initiatives, she would face them with the quiet strength she had reclaimed, with the support of her daughter, and with the clarity that came from finally living in alignment with her true self. 3 weeks later, Evelyn stood at the podium in the federal courthouse press room, Arthur Penhaligon at her side, addressing the reporters gathered for her statement. "This morning, Sterling Vance withdrew his lawsuit against the Blackwood Group," she announced, her voice steady and clear. "As we have maintained from the beginning, the claims were without merit. Our technology was developed independently, as the evidence we provided to Mr. Vance's legal team clearly demonstrated." She paused, making brief eye contact with several of the journalists she recognized. "Rather than pursuing counterclaims or seeking damages, we consider this matter closed. The Blackwood Group will continue its focus on sustainable development and responsible business practices. The Blackwood Education Trust will continue its mission of creating opportunities for women and girls. We have no further comment on this matter and will not be taking questions today. Thank you." As she stepped away from the microphone, a reporter called out, "Ms. Blackwood, is it true that Sterling Vance has left the country following this withdrawal?" Evelyn didn't respond, maintaining her composed expression as she and Arthur exited the press room. Only when they were safely in the car did she allow herself a small sigh of relief. "That should be the end of it," Arthur said, checking his phone for the initial media coverage. "The Times is already framing it as a vindication. The Post is less charitable to Sterling. They're calling it a humiliating retreat." "I don't need vindication or his humiliation," Evelyn said quietly. "I just need to move forward without these distractions." "Well, you'll have that chance now," Arthur assured her. "His new venture in Dubai has apparently collapsed as well. According to my sources, he's headed to a remote island in the South Pacific. Some kind of spiritual retreat." Evelyn couldn't help but smile at the image. "Perhaps that's exactly what he needs." "Perhaps," Arthur agreed, though his tone suggested skepticism. "In any case, the Blackwood Group's reputation remains intact, and the Education Trust's fundraising has actually increased during this controversy. Your handling of the situation has impressed a lot of people, Evelyn." "Including the family?" she asked, thinking of the upcoming trip to Cape Cod. "Especially the family," Arthur confirmed. "Eleanor called this morning. She was effusive in her praise. For a Blackwood, anyway." The following weekend found Evelyn and Madeline driving along the Massachusetts coastline toward the Blackwood family compound, a sprawling estate on a private peninsula that had been in the family for 6 generations. As they passed through the imposing gates, Madeline let out a low whistle. "So this is where you grew up?" she asked, taking in the manicured grounds and the massive shingled main house overlooking the Atlantic. "Until I was 18, Evelyn confirmed. "Then I couldn't wait to escape to New York, to find my own path. And now we're back," Madeline observed. "Full circle." "Not quite," Evelyn corrected her. "We're not the same people who left. That makes all the difference." Eleanor greeted them on the wide front porch, elegant in linen pants and a cashmere sweater despite the summer heat. She embraced Evelyn with genuine warmth, then turned to Madeline with undisguised curiosity. "You have your grandmother's eyes," she said, studying her grandniece. "And her spirit, from what Evelyn tells me." "I'll take that as a compliment," Madeline replied with a confidence that made Evelyn smile. "As you should," Eleanor assured her. Eleanor Blackwood was a formidable woman. She would have approved of your mother's recent reclamation. The weekend unfolded better than Evelyn had dared to hope. The Blackwood Family Foundation Board, consisting of cousins, in-laws, and a few trusted advisors, listened attentively to her presentation on the Education Trust's work and the Phoenix Initiative's results. They asked thoughtful questions, offered constructive suggestions, and ultimately approved a 5-year, $20 million partnership to expand both programs nationally. With no strings attached, Eleanor emphasized during the final discussion, the Blackwood name will be acknowledged as a partner, but the vision and leadership remain yours, Evelyn. Later, as they walked along the private beach, Eleanor offered a more personal observation. You've surprised us all, you know? When you married that man and disappeared into his shadow, we thought we'd lost you for good. You had, Evelyn acknowledged. I needed to find my own way back. Well, you've done that spectacularly, Eleanor said with grudging admiration. And in the process, you've reminded the family of what the Blackwood name should stand for. Not just wealth or status, but purpose, vision, impact. On their last evening at the compound, as Evelyn and Madeline packed for their return to New York, Madeline posed a question that caught her mother off guard. Do you ever regret it? The years with Dad, do you see them as wasted time? Evelyn set down the sweater she was folding, giving the question the consideration it deserved. No, she said finally. I don't regret them. Those years shaped me, challenged me, ultimately forced me to reclaim parts of myself I had surrendered. And they gave me you, the greatest gift of my life. Madeline smiled, satisfied with the answer. I've been thinking about names, she said, changing the subject slightly. I've decided not to change mine after all. I'm Evelyn Vance. That's who I've always been. But I'm thinking of using Blackwood professionally as my curator name. Madeline Vance Blackwood. Evelyn tested the sound of it. It has a certain gravitas. It honors both sides of my heritage, Madeline explained. The part's worth keeping, anyway. As they drove back to New York the next day, Evelyn felt a sense of completion. Not an ending, but a harmonious connecting of past and present, a foundation for the future she was still building. The Phoenix Initiative's second cohort would begin next week, 20 women including, somewhat surprisingly, Katarina Novak. The Blackwood Education Trust would soon expand to 5 additional cities. The Women's Business Incubator was already nurturing its first group of entrepreneurs. And Madeline was thriving, embracing both sides of her heritage while forging her own distinct path. Evelyn's phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca Chun at the New York Times. Profile running in Sunday's magazine. Headline, The Phoenix Effect. How Evelyn Blackwood is rewriting the rules for women's second acts. Would love your thoughts after it publishes. Evelyn smiled, typing back a simple, looking forward to it, before returning her attention to the road ahead, both literally and figuratively. The journey from shadow to light wasn't a straight line but a winding path, with challenges and revelations at every turn. But for perhaps the first time in her adult life, Evelyn Blackwood was walking that path fully present, fully herself, fully alive to the possibilities that awaited. The millionaire had brought a model to the event, never realizing who his wife truly was until she walked in, not as Mrs. Sterling Vance, but as Evelyn Blackwood, architect of her own destiny. And that was just the beginning of a story still being written, one courageous step at a time. If Evelyn's journey from shadow to light inspired you, hit that subscribe button to join our timeless Love Tales family. And remember to share this video with a sister who needs to be reminded of her worth.